So I think I first realized that it was a problem that I'd gone too far was when I first smoked crack. That's when I realized, and I was about 20 years old. It kind of progressed. So, I was, 15, 16 years old. Came out of high school, found myself a new group of friends, people that I felt more connected to, people that kind of appreciated me more and kind of accepted me more. And those friends happened to be, smoking weed at the time. So I first tried my first drug was weed. And I didn't like it. The first time I had a drag of weed, I was sick, and then I was very, very high from that one drag, and then the next week I did the same thing, and then before I knew it, I wasn't getting sick anymore, and then I just kept forcing myself to fit in with other people. That's kind of how it started. That was what opened up my mind to drugs, and then it kind of progressed, obviously, with alcohol, going for nights out or going for like house parties or events. Everybody's drinking, so I'd also drink. And that carried on for maybe about 2 years until I turned about 18 years old. But I started going clubbing around 16, hanging around with older people, more respectable people in the city. So I saw at the time, I held them in high regards. So I just kind of followed them. And then obviously whilst I've been partying and stuff like that in clubs, cocaine came about. And I tried my first line at a toilet, in some random club, and I loved it straight away. I was hooked on that feeling, that euphoric feeling, that clear, aware, just different feeling. I wasn't anxious, I wasn't worried, I didn't care. I was just feeling euphoria. You know what I mean? Immense euphoria. And then obviously, other things came about like LSD, pills, MDMA, mushrooms, everything kind of in that space of time, as I'm hanging around with more people and, experimenting more with new drugs. And obviously each new drug has its new set of people, and I was always hopping around to different groups of people. So I was always either smoking weed or drinking alcohol or sniffing coke or trying LSD in a mountain somewhere. So I was kind of, experimenting a lot. And at the time, it just felt fun. It just felt like this is what people do. This is what kids do. This is part of growing up. This is normal. I didn't really see addiction coming. And I remember the first time I tried crack. I've been sniffing so much coke, it wouldn't go up my nose anymore. And I saw my friend smoking something on the side of the stairs. So instantly I'm like, what's that? I've not seen that before. You know what I mean? So straight away I was interested. And then he just hands me the pipe. He says, try this. And then I smoked it, and that was it. I didn't sniff coke again. I was hooked straight away onto the crack. I didn't think it would be that much of a jump from cocaine to crack, but it was. It was a completely different feeling. Even though it's a very similar drug, pretty much the same, it's a completely different feeling when you smoke it. It's more intense. It's more, you're hooked on it straight away. It's an up and then down and then up and then down. It's not like coke. Coke kind of lasted a bit longer. And that was it. I started smoking crack every day. And then just think everything went downhill. Crimes escalated, hanging around more people who smoke crack and heroin, and that's when my life kind of took a big turn. And for a while I still wasn't thinking I was an addict. I just, I don't know what I was thinking. I knew that it was a problem. I just carried on. I hid it from everybody that I knew who didn't. Like, I wouldn't show the friends that were sniffing coke, that I was smoking crack. I'd keep it very separate, you know what I mean? Because I know that they would judge me, and I wouldn't be accepted as part of them if I was smoking crack, if they knew that, But eventually, I couldn't hide it anymore. Word started going around the town that I was smoking crack, and I used to deny it whenever someone challenged me, and then eventually I just stopped denying it. So yeah, and that carried on for a while, causing a lot of problems, owing people money. And when you're owing people money, you get into a lot of dangerous situations. People are always out to find you and kill you and threaten you, and get your family involved. Everything that came with the crack world. I thought that was dark. I thought this is my low point. And it wasn't until I got into a situation with these debt collectors, and then it got my mum and my dad involved, and then after that, my mum and dad sent me down to London to my auntie to try and straighten things out, to try and keep me away from Stoke. And then I just ended up repeating the same thing. I got involved with gangs in London. I started selling weed for them, and then using that weed money to buy crack, and then getting into situations with them, and then they came after me, and then I had to move back up to Stoke again. So for the last 8 months of my using, when I went back up to Stoke, I found this stuff called monkey dust, and it's a drug that's pretty much only in the city that I'm in, that I'm from. It's a synthetic drug, and there's like three types to it. There's a yellow form, which is more like crack, it's euphoric feeling, and it's an upper, and then there's like a brown version, it's a more like heroin, so it's more calm and mellow, and you can go about your day, and you don't look all prangy and fucked up. And then there's a white one, which basically, as soon as you smoke that, it's just you turn psychotic. You go straight into psychosis. Everything's chasing you. Everything's after you. Demons are everywhere. When I'd smoke that stuff, I'd be running around the city up and down all night, and then taking more, and then carry on running up and down to those blisters on my feet. Wouldn't stop. Wouldn't eat. Wouldn't drink. Wouldn't sleep. So that's when I went homeless. I'd spent the last 8 months of my using on the street because I was too scared to go home. I was too scared to be around other users because, situations that were happening, whilst being in that world. Because, I thought the crack and heroin world was bad. The dust world, people are getting raped all the time. People are getting abused all the time. People are getting kidnapped and, injured and set up and all kinds of things every single day. It's only a matter of time before it happens, and a lot of things happen to me. All the things I just said happened to me. So, eventually I just went solo. I just kept myself to myself. But yeah, that's the progression of the drugs. And then I ended up in rehab.
Would you say you were already like this as a kid, like chasing this chaos?
Yeah, I've grown up a swimmer. That was my sport. So every day throughout the week, from Monday to Friday, we'll be training. 2 hours, 2.5 hours before school, 2.5 hours after school, every day. And then it'd get to the Saturday and the Sunday, and that would be the competitions. You know what I mean? So I loved the adrenaline rush that I'd get every weekend from competitions. I'd say I did very well. I held a lot of records, and that adrenaline rush of winning, just filled me with something. I felt like I was making my dad proud. I was making myself proud. I was making my city proud. I just felt like, I felt like on top of the world then when I was swimming, and then that stopped. When that stopped at 16 years old, it was like, okay, fuck, what do I do with the rest of my weekend? What do I do with the rest of my life? So I just stopped the swimming and I just added drugs because it gave me that same like woof feeling. I just jumped from one thing to another, just following the chaos. Whatever I saw was not normal, it was like exciting to me. I would jump straight on it, and I'd know how to talk to people. I'd know how to fit in. I'd know how to be around people. I've always been a people person because I've always tried to fit in. So I've known how to change my characteristics or my personality. I've always known how to adapt and change it to fit in with the people that I'm around. I know for a fact if I had never have met certain people along my journey, I would never have tried certain drugs. I've never bought a drug without having already have tried it from someone else giving it me for free. You know what I mean? So I never thought, okay, I want to try LSD. I don't know anything about it. I don't know any friends that are using it, but I'm going to go and buy it and be the first one. I've never done that. It was always through, it's just in the, I'll be with people and then they've got it and they're saying, try it. And I try it. And that's not me blaming someone else, that's me, like, I wanted it. You know what I mean? I was interested in it. I was sold. You didn't even have to sell it to me. I was so curious because I'd already tried weed and I knew how weed made me feel. And I thought, oh, this is a new drug. I want to see how this one makes me feel. Okay, I've done this one loads. I know how this makes me feel. I want to see how this one makes me feel. Because I remember always saying before I was even like 15, I always used to say, I'll never smoke cigarettes. That doesn't do, I don't understand why people smoke cigarettes. It doesn't do anything. I understand why people smoke weed. It gets you high, but I'll never smoke cigarettes. As soon as I start drinking, guess what? I'm smoking cigarettes. You know what I mean? Even though it's not giving me any high, I'm just doing it because everyone else is doing it. That's how it went for me.
How would you define addiction today?
For me, it's the obsession and the compulsion to use. I can become addicted to anything. It doesn't have to be a drug. but my behaviors around whatever it is I'm addicted to are what make me an addict. So, for example, sex. After I got clean, I put the drugs down. I realized that I had a problem with sex. You know what I mean? And women and relationships. That was I had a problem with that, and I picked that up. I didn't listen to anyone's advice. I thought, no, I'm different. I'm not gonna use drugs because of a woman or because of sex. It doesn't make sense to me. So I went down the rabbit hole of constantly searching for sex, constantly being on Tinder, always trying to fill a hole. After that, then it was literally filling a hole. I didn't like being bored. I didn't want to be by myself. All these feelings. And same on the other side, I'd be, even if I was feeling good, I'd be like, okay, what can make this better? Sex. You know what I mean? So it was both ends of the spectrum. These were my behaviors. These were my thoughts. So it doesn't even have to be a drug. If I look back now, the more I've learned about addiction is I was an addict before I took drugs, because I would do things like steal money from my dad's wallet to go and buy some match attacks. I didn't even like football. I didn't even care about cards, but I would do the most so that I could get what I wanted and keep doing it until I got caught. You know what I mean? That's not normal behavior. If I become obsessed with something, my moral, my value, they all go out the window, because I want to achieve that. I want to get that. So, like I say, when it came to stuff like crack, I rolled out family, I rolled out everything. I didn't care about anything. I wanted my stuff, and I didn't care how I was going to get it. I didn't care who I had to hurt or what business I had to destroy to get my money so I could get crack. And it was the same behaviours I was displaying at 10 years old, stealing from my dad's wallet, not caring that he has to make that money to support us, and I'm going and spending hundreds on match attacks.
Was there ever a moment where you were satisfied or where you felt like it was enough?
Never. It didn't matter if it was weed or alcohol, or it didn't matter what it was. You never feel tired. You just want to keep going. It was always me that would carry on the party, know where the next place to go is, know where to get more drugs from for free. It was always me that kind of took things on. People would go home and drop off, and I never understood why they'd want it to stop. Or unless I did too much. It was only when I was young I'd do too much weed and I'd be sick, or too much alcohol and I'd pass out. Those were the times when I stopped, because it wasn't my choice to stop. My body couldn't handle it.
Do you think it's possible for people to notice an addiction early on? Like, I'm thinking with alcohol or with weed in the countries where it's legal, it's such a normal and such a social thing for young kids to experiment that, right? Um, but would you say there could maybe be a way of noticing such behaviors or certain patterns in people?
I think it's more. This is just my personal opinion. There's not enough awareness around what can turn somebody into a drug addict. Look, there are people that go through their whole lives as an addict, but they've never taken drugs before. You know what I mean? But they either may manage to maintain or manage their life up to a certain point. But when it comes to stuff like drugs, I think, from my personal experience, it depends on your environment and the people that you're around. That influences the most. Because if you can't get certain substances in your environment, you're not going to be able to try those substances to then, develop you onto harder drugs or more dangerous people. If you haven't got those sources, then it's going to be very hard. But in places like England, it's everywhere. Places like America, it's everywhere. Australia, it's everywhere. So it's for me, it just depends massively on your environment and what you're searching for. If you're someone who's searching for chaos, or you're searching for excitement and thrill and adrenaline, you're very likely to end up on those substances, because that's everything you're looking for. It's hard to tell. You can't monitor someone's behaviors from the minute they're born, or know what's going on in someone's mind. I didn't even know that that's what was going on in my mind until now I look back. You know what I mean? So even myself, I didn't know. So how are other people supposed to know? It's easy for me to say, don't try drugs. But how are you going to know what path you're going to go down? I don't know. It's a hard one. It's a very hard one. It just there's many factors that can can take you out with drugs. You don't even have to be. You might not have even been an addict as a kid, but then you've somehow ended up on crack, and because of how addictive crack is, now you're an addict. But there are some people that have been displaying addict behaviors from 5 years old. So it's kind of hard to differentiate between the two.
Could you tell me about the moment where you realize that you are an addict and that you have a problem with substances?
I knew that I never labeled it as a problem to myself. I didn't have the courage to say that it was a problem to myself, but it was very obvious to myself that it was a major problem, but I'd accepted it. I just accepted it for what it was. I wanted because the drugs had power over me. I didn't have any power over what I wanted. I didn't know what I wanted anymore. All I knew was that I wanted drugs because that was the power of the drugs. There was no choice left for me. You know what I mean? I surrendered. That's the word I'd use. I wouldn't say that I give up or I realized I had a problem. Like I surrendered when my brother and my mom found me in a crack house or a dust house, and gave me an ultimatum, and that ultimatum was strong enough for me to just say okay, and then I ended up in rehab. That wasn't my choice. That wasn't my doing. I just said yes and got on a plane. That changed my life. They didn't know what else to do, and this was the only option they had left. To be honest, if they'd given me that ultimatum 6 months beforehand, I'd have probably ran away. Because even when I accepted that ultimatum at that moment in time, on that journey on the way home in the car, I was kicking and screaming, and my mind knew what was happening, and I wanted to get out. I wanted to run. It took my brother, and my mum a lot of patience with me. I was kicking and screaming, and I manipulated my mum into getting me drugs just so that I would stay in the house for a week before I got on the plane. I didn't even stay in the house. I stayed in the stables because I couldn't. I knew I couldn't use drugs in the house. I didn't want to use drugs in the house, so I stayed in the stable. It was cold every night, but I was happy because I had my drugs. And I manipulated my mum every day to take me to go and get some drugs so that I could just last the day. Otherwise, I would have run off. And I wouldn't be here. And I'd probably be dead right now. You know what I mean? So, I didn't want to let go of the drugs, and I didn't. I just never wanted to accept. I didn't want to admit it. Like I say, I accepted it, yes, but I didn't want to admit it out loud that I had a problem.
I was about to ask, like, when you say out loud, like, inside of you, did you want help, but you just didn't want to express it on the outside out of fear? Because I wonder, after everything you just said and everything you've been through, it's hard, and the brain must tell you like to get help or something, or I don't know. I imagine something like survival instinct. So what I'm asking is like, deep down, did you want help, but you just couldn't express it on the outside because you thought, oh, I can't let go of the drugs and I'll have to face all of this.
Yeah, there's a lot of fear, but the way I look at it is, it was almost like I wasn't. It felt like I wasn't intelligent enough to be able to say how I needed help because I didn't know how I needed help. In my mind, I had a strong feeling that rehab's not going to help me. So there's no way anyone's going to be able to help me. And I didn't know about things like NA and AA. And even if I did, I would have created a scenario in my mind that would have made me not trust that. The only reason I came to rehab here was because it wasn't in England. My auntie tried to take me to a rehab in England, and I was like, this is not going to work. I know for a fact it's not going to work. I felt like there was no hope left for me, so I didn't even want to ask for help. They tried. My mum, she'd always try and drop meals off to me or something if she knew where I was. She'd try and, cause they do whatever they could, but I didn't think there was any way that they could help me. And I can't even help myself, so I just give up and just carried on. But anytime I would see my reflection in the mirror, it would scare me. Because I didn't know who I was looking at anymore. That wasn't me. It was a different person. It was a vicious, violent person that I never even knew I could create or be like. So the drugs took care of that.
I'd like to go into the recovery part of your addiction as well. You mentioned earlier that you ended up going to rehab. Can you tell me a little bit maybe about how you felt when that happened?
I don't think my mind had fully accepted that I was going to rehab. I didn't come here with the intention to stop drugs completely. That's what I think, that's something that got me here, having that mentality that I'm not going to stop. I'm just going to go and try it. It's in Thailand, it's out of the country. I've got nothing to fear. However, if I thought that, okay, I'm going to go there to stop drugs and change my life, I wouldn't have came, because the fear would have kicked in, because I knew I was going to lose my drugs. And that was the only thing that I cared about, was my drugs. And then it wasn't until I relapsed in treatment on weed that I kind of had to surrender again. I had to accept that I'm an addict. And then other cross addictions came out, like the sex. That started straight away in rehab as well. You know what I mean? I started unraveling my behaviors in rehab. But yeah, so I say, if it wasn't for this place, the way it runs, the things they do, the program, the schedule, if it wasn't for this place and me falling in love with it, then I'd be dead. Facts.
Do you think the amount of time you stayed in rehab was important to your recovery?
Definitely. So I did 3 months here in the primary treatment, but after the first month I'd relapsed, you know what I mean, on weed. But then I managed to be honest about it, and then I did a relapse prevention. Whatever, they kept me here. They kept me in. They didn't kick me out. I should have been kicked out many times, but I was honest about it, and they kept me in. Then I did another 3 months in a sober house. So that's a grand total of 6 months in treatment. And then even after that 6 months, I was not ready to go home, because I was still dealing with other addictions that came up. I was still acting out my behaviors, learning about my behaviors, learning about why I am the way I am, and the traumas that I've got, and going. All these things were new to me, and I was still learning after 6 months, and I'm still learning now. Which is the reason as to why I've gone around this circle. Because I was done 6 months in treatment, and then I thought, how can I stay in this environment? Because I'm safe. I'm not using. I'm clean. This is the longest I've been clean. Stuff is happening. Things are changing. I'm getting my family back. I'm being trusted again. All these things that I'd lost, I started to get back, and I love that feeling of having those things back. You know what I mean? More than the feeling of drugs. I love these things, so I didn't want to lose them. So I thought, how can I stay in this environment and not have to go home? So I had to volunteer in the sober house. And he accepted me, and I carried on volunteering for him for the rest of the year. And then I went back home for 6 weeks. So this was after over a year being in treatment settings. I went back home for 6 weeks, and I built up enough tools, and I had enough advice on where to go and what to do. But when I went back, it was a horrible feeling. The fears came back, one by one. The looking over my shoulders in Tesco's and petrol stations, and even at the meetings, I was skeptical to go in, because I'm thinking, what if there's someone in there that I've done something to, So I was still scared when I went back. So for the whole 6 weeks, I just kind of isolated myself in the family house. But I knew that this is not home anymore. I've destroyed home for me. I can never rebuild anything here again. And then I came back to Thailand. The sober house offered me a job. And then I accepted it and came straight back. And worked for him as a support worker. Things went the way they did. I left him and then started working here at the primary centre that I first came in. In a way, I've not left treatment. In a way, I'm still part of the schedule and the process and the environment, because this is what seems to be working for me. Having connection to other people that are either going through the same thing or trying to help the same people, that is what feels like a higher purpose for me now, because I destroyed everything. So me working in this environment now, I'm giving back, and I'm able to stay in a place where my heart feels at home. and I feel safe. I've got no shoulders to look over. I haven't created any damage, and this has been 2.5 years now, and I'm creating healthy bonds, healthy relationships, whatever. I'm creating things that I've got nothing to do with me taking drugs. So I'm happy with that.
How does it make you feel to talk about all of this and share your story today?
For me now, it's like I know my story very well, more than I know anything about anything. So being able to share that and get it across to someone else who may be going through the same thing or experiencing the same situations, or knowing that can completely change the change the course trajectory, that's it, of somebody else's life. That's enough for me. I'm happy with that, and it helps me. I'm sharing all the time. We're taught in meetings from the minute we come into rehab to share. Share, 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 share. And sharing is the only thing that's been able to take weight off my back. Being honest about where I'm at, what I'm doing. You know what I mean? Because I hid those things for so long. I kept everything to myself for so long. And now having the chance to share it, I'll always say yes. Because it can help someone else and more so help myself.
I feel like this topic is not entirely understood by the public.
It's not understood at all.
Yeah, what do you think is misunderstood? Like, what do you think the public gets wrong?
I think the public they look down on people like drug addicts. They look down on them too much, as if this was their dream to be a drug addict, as if it was their choice to be who they are now. People in general, they're very quick to judge something they don't understand, and also something to the public is to not be afraid to help someone. Even if you know that person is going to use your money, if you're trying to help somebody by giving them money, you might have just saved that person a day of crime. You know what I mean? Like, they know either way they're going to go and do what they have to do to get the drugs, but you helping or supporting or giving some kind of love or help to that one person might just change their life. It might not change it the first time or the second time or the third time, but you might be that fourth time that changes their life and makes them realize something. If you don't understand addiction, sit down with a homeless person who's taking drugs and they'll tell you about it. Educate yourself before you judge, because that's what saves people's lives, not brushing them under the rug and pushing them in a corner as if they're some kind of rat. They don't know who that person was before the drugs. They don't know the situations or the choices they've made to end up on the drugs. Because those situations and choices most likely are the same choices they've also made before in life. It's just the next 5 or 6 decisions after that weren't the same. But it's not to say that that couldn't happen to them. It can at any point. It can happen to anyone at any point.
Well, thanks a lot. I hope it was okay.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you.